Hello again, friends. Welcome back. My name is Oscar Montesiga. I'm a certified wine and spirits instructor for the International Wine and Spirits Guild. And thanks for joining me here again at the Booze Library at Uncorked Vintage Academia. Today I am bringing you for Whiskey Wednesday. Happy Whiskey Wednesday. I hope you're enjoying your dram, whatever you're choosing to drink, or join me with the Herald. That's what we're tasting today. The Herald is a label made by Saint Alley's, Saint Alley, and that's just, I guess, the project. Saint Alley is the project. This is, however, made by Likarish Enterprises. And what that is really, Likarish Enterprises is a collaboration of Iron Root Republic Distillery and the Liquor Hound. And Liquor Hound is a fellow YouTuber, so you're gonna find him around. Hopefully you find some of his videos and reviews. Shout out to him. He's an experienced YouTuber and taster, and he decided to, eventually put a name on his name on a label. And so collaboration with Iron Root Republic Distillery. With that said, basically, the Herald is a blend of straight bourbon whiskies, and that blend happens from Iron Root's own corn whiskey, or rather corn bourbon base, a bourbon heavy on corn, of course. And they also use MGP's high rye bourbon. So basically it's a blend of a high rye bourbon from the Midwest and a heavily corn influenced bourbon from Iron Root Republic. What is particularly unique about the Herald is that they finish it in Armagnac Cask. And some of you that have followed me, or if you know me at all, Armagnac is one of my favorite spirits in the world. So I decided to give this a shot, even though some of you that do know me, you know that bourbon is probably my least favorite spirit in general. But I think the thought of the marriage of bourbon with an Armagnac finish, it's completely worth the try. Just like there are certain bourbons finished in cognac cask that I also like. So the brandy influence on bourbon is to make it softer, maybe fruitier, and obviously nuance. So nuance and complexity is something we're always looking for, as well as balance. And balance shows the craftsmanship of both, depending on the case, but it could be the distiller, of course, the craftsmanship of the distiller, and as well as the craftsmanship of the blender. And so in this case we have certain entities involved, both the distiller in the Midwest, the distiller in Texas, and then the blending or assemblage of that happening, plus your finishing in the Armagnac cask. So there's a lot going on, moving pieces. This is batch 2 already. They already released batch number 1, and if you watch Liquor Hound on YouTube, he will give you his review on the batch number 1, alongside the other bourbons they make, and I believe one is finished in rum cask and the other one in cognac cask. But I believe it's the same philosophy. Don't quote me on that. I didn't watch the full review, or I'm very familiar with Saint Alley. I'm really not. But I think they're all a blend of straight bourbon from the Midwest and Texas, and then finishing their respective cask of cognac, rum, and then the Armagnac, called the Herald. I do love the name, the Herald. I think it does have somewhat of a reminiscent storytelling aspect of it. Armagnac comes from Gascony, where the Three Musketeers happen to have taken place. So it's all part of that storytelling that some labels or producers are better at doing than others. So great job at that. This sits right about 53.5%, and it is no age stated other than it being a blend of straight whiskies. So that tells us that it is a minimum of 2 years. And other than that, it is one of 2,400 bottles. other notes, and this is only thanks to me watching the review on Liquor Hound, is that he tells us, at least for batch 1, that the ex-Armagnac Cask was an XO Armagnac Cask, and that is a minimum of 10 years of age for that Armagnac. So, all of that, I don't have much details. I'm pretty much going at it, not knowing necessarily a whole lot about the background of both Iron Root or Liquor Hound. Even though I'm in the spirits world, I only recently found his channel, so hopefully he gives me a like for like. But I do look forward to exploring more of what he has to offer. Anyway, we're tasting neat, and the spirit is clear. The color here is a medium gold. The hue is gold, and it has a canary transition. And then that canary transition extends to a thin, clear edge, almost to not so thin, but almost a slightly wide, clear edge. But the color is beautiful. It's a medium golden hue in the core of the color. My initial nasal impact is drying. It really just dries out your nose. That's the main quality of the primary nosing, except there's also a little bit of warming. So if you do stick your nose long enough, that drying becomes warming sensation as well. All right, we'll move on to the nose, and the primary and prominent aromas are corn husk and rye malt. There's a lot of rye and corn influence, a lot of baking spice, and then that moves into chamomile and honey. There's a lot of orange zest, orange oils in general. The fruit becomes like apricot. Savory herbs are like thyme and menthol, mint, savory thyme, red tea, and there's also marzipan. But it's heavily influenced by rye, corn, baking spice more than anything else. So for me, the production aroma intensity is adequate and simple. I do like that I smell the production of it, the corn and the rye. And the élevage aroma intensity, for me, the bouquet is also adequate and complex. Because really, most of the complexity in the nose is coming from élevage. All those nuance, all those layers, the spice, the savory herbs, the fruit, it's really coming from élevage. So well done on the élevage and blending for that particular part, as well as props to production for showcasing corn and rye still on the nose and not being overtaken by charred barrels. The length is average, and the character is fine. I don't mind revisiting this nose. It's beyond ordinary. It's just not that simple. So it's a fine character for the persistence. All right, let's give it a whirl. The primary mouthfeel effect is astringency. There's a lot of astringency that is also combined nicely with coating. So the astringency is persistent, but the effect on the mouthfeel is also coating. There's a nice round mouthfeel to it. With that said, the alcohol and glycerol are smooth, and the spirit is medium full body towards full body. So this is, almost as heavy as it gets, unless you have something about 60%. Hopefully it does feel heavier. Sometimes they don't. It just depends on the overall balance at the end. But this is medium full, leaning towards full. And the alcohol is generous. It is definitely letting you know it's there. It's very persistent. It's very obvious, but not necessarily in a bad way. It's got a nice astringency combined with a coating mouthfeel that makes it feel round, beautifully cohesive with the body and the weight of the spirit. The primary taste overall is the primary taste is actually bitter and sour. There are highlights of sweetness, but the primary taste is definitely dominated by bitterness. And alongside that smoothness that we already talked about, the mouthfeel, the finish is also buttery. The taste is buttery. It has a creamy like feel to it. And lastly, moving on to the taste. The flavors are dominated by baking spice. There are just a lot of baking spices. There's also a little bit of ginger. You taste the rye malt. There is spiciness of rye malt. There is still sweetness from corn in a corn husk type format. There's a bit of chamomile, a bit of red apple. There is a little bit of apricot, and the honey still show up. The baking spices are also intertwined. And when I say baking spices, think of cloves, cinnamon, nutmeg, etc. But those semi-hot, semi-sweet, semi-savory spices are also mixed in with something bright and savory, also like cardamom and coriander. There's a lot of orange zest, maybe not as much in the as in the nose. I think on the palate is subdued a little bit, but you can still taste orange oil and orange zest. There's also a lot of darkness on the flavor. There's something like black currant. Black currants, maybe a little bit of date or a blonde fig, somewhere in between a blonde and a dark fig. There's also something like a pickled green walnut and pure tea. I think that the nose has red tea, which is a little younger, brighter, fresher. But on the palate, that tea becomes like an aged black tea, a pure tea. The flavor itself is quite concentrated. It's really prominent on the palate and complex. It's concentrated and complex and bold. I think those are great descriptors that I have on my sensory evaluation that set this apart as an outlier. It's not just your standard. Here's what you should expect out of a bourbon. It's like this is bourbon plus to an extent. It giving you a lot of boxes to check, which is a fun spirit. The finish and the aftertaste, they're pretty straightforward and very long. And my overall impression is that it is very good. What prevents me right now from putting this to an excellent category for me so far is that somehow there is a lingering bitterness that creates an out of balance experience in general. That I think something missed the mark. It has a bitter component that it's hard to get rid of, and it may be overpowering to some folks. But it's lovely in the sense that it shows great craftsmanship in production, that shows raw material, it shows great blending techniques and élevage techniques, great complexity of combination of flavors and aromas and character. But on the palate, something seems out of balance in the sense that it becomes overly bitter and not in a pleasant way. I think there's something missing that would balance that bitterness that shouldn't be there necessarily. However, with that said, I think it is a very nice blend of bourbons to sip on, especially if you're having a bite, because those bites will actually balance that bitterness. So that's the way for me to balance this spirit right now. I can recommend you trying it with some fatty cheeses, some creamy cheeses. Whether you want to call it a brie, a camembert, something like that. I think it will also go well with some fatty hard cheeses. Try to avoid salty cheeses, hard salty cheeses. I think you'll be better off if you have something quite fatty, whether it's aged or not aged. But a fatty cheese and even some fatty savory meats like pâté or foie gras, all that fat and the astringency on the spirit will actually make a very nice combination. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something new about either bourbon or Armagnac or tasting. And either way, you can leave me a comment, but I appreciate a like and subscribe. That helps grow the channel and bring you more. So cheers to you. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time. Happy Whiskey Wednesday.